Hello, all, and welcome to the first part of our week 5 lectures. I apologize for not getting this to you sooner, but I've had some technology setbacks this week. I am going to be taking a look at the discussion forum posts from week 3. Remember, that was the week of the Common Core State Standards where you did that really fun learning module and then provided your thoughts on the Common Core State Standards. So a couple of topics of conversation for this screencast are the learning module experience, the standards themselves, the test, dun dun dun, students with special needs, curriculum slash teaching materials, the transition, training and development, English language learners and special education, and parent involvement. So let's jump in with the learning module. Thank you, Stephanie, for your very honest thoughts here in saying I found the pre and post assessment quite interesting considering they were about the Common Core state standards and were rather unclear multiple choice questions that focus more on rote memorization of information instead of an understanding of the content of the Common Core. I consider myself quite knowledgeable about the shifts and the content, but missed most of the questions on both the pre and post assessments. I just found it a little bit funny. Touche, great point. Yes, this was a learning experience on the Common Core, and the assessment they gave you was nothing aligned to Common Core. And you were not alone in feeling unsuccessful on that assessment. In fact, Erin says, I did terrible on the pre-assessment. I was very surprised that I did that poorly because I have been having Common Core crammed into my head for the last year and a half. The questions, however, were more along the lines of how the Common Core state standards came into being and what is covered in a general way. Other thoughts on the learning module, Kathy? Like Elizabeth and Stephanie, I too was surprised by the pre-post assessment questions with all of the important concepts, ideas, beliefs behind Common Core. Some of the questions just seemed unimportant facts we should have memorized. I missed 2 on both the assessments and didn't do too poorly, but some were just not representative of the big ideas, which is a part of the Common Core emphasis. So there you have it, a multiple choice test that serves as a non-example of how you should assess student learning, right? It didn't even assess you on the big ideas. It was more unimportant facts. Yeah. And then Susan, my favorite comment on the learning module was it seemed a bit of propaganda to me rather than showing us snippets of what's to come. And that's a big criticism out right now, especially from the teachers I work with, is what does this look like? I need models. I need, video of teacher implementing this. I need resources. I need tools. It is a little vague on the how I'm supposed to teach this, which is great for encouraging and promoting my creativity, but really, what does this look like? I don't know. I need more models. And yeah, it is a bit of propaganda because, as you can tell, there are a lot of mixed feelings with the adoption of the Common Core. Some people really like it, some people have a bad taste in their mouth, and so we do have to invest them in this movement and use propaganda to do so. So great noticing on there, Susan. All right, let's talk a little bit about the new and improved standards. Great thoughts here from Kim, who says, this was my feeling in reading the different frameworks and touches a bit on what Stephanie was getting at as well. Stephanie mentioned she feels that Common Core State Standards' message to parents and teachers is we weren't doing our job. We failed our students. I believe as teachers, we were doing our job too well. We were teaching the standards, but the standards were flawed and failed our students. So that's a great point, Kim. Yeah, we were doing our job teaching the standards as they were written, which is as a result, students did really well in decoding and basic literacy skills, but they aren't prepared for the challenges of the 21st century for college and career readiness because those standards were so focused on emergent reading and basic reading skills and performance on a multiple choice test. So you're exactly right in that we were teaching the standards we were given, and now we need to shift our standards So here we go. We'll pick up right here. When you go back and read the previous framework, it is laden with messages that the job of the teacher is to deliver and for students to receive. First sentence on page 12, the student should learn and teachers should teach. The primary assumption is that students master particular skills and knowledge, which are prerequisite for later, more complex, higher order skills and knowledge. And she goes on to say that this is backwards, right? This is completely backwards and counter to how we understand the mechanics of genuine learning, which is beyond rote regurgitation. And the Common Core is attempting to rectify this and put it back again. We are motivated to learn skills when we have connected to the big picture, the why, when we can see how it all comes together, when we are motivated to learn the how and the what. So great points here from Kim, which kind of echoes what someone commented on the lack of assessment quality in the learning module. It didn't really assess the why, but more of the smaller details versus the big picture. But like Kim is saying, you're right, our standards were flawed. The Common Core is an attempt to, put it back again the way it should be and to give our students the skills that were lacking previously. So deep thoughts on student responsibility. That is a big push with the Common Core. It's not about teachers standing and delivering and students being recipients of knowledge. It's really about students interacting with the content. Christina Vicente says, I have read through the Common Core standards introduction at least a few times. This time around, however, what caught my eye was the call of Common Core for students to have agency as readers and thinkers. Common Core calls for students to adjust purpose for literacy, appreciate nuances, to be discerning readers and listeners, to question an author's or speaker's claims, to evaluate others, to select tools. So that's the big piece here is Common Core is pushing more student agency, student responsibility, not enabling learners. Teachers should not be doing all of the work. So that is a big difference with the standards. She also goes on to say that she viewed, the video on Common Core and ELs, and is noted by Kathy Lindahl in our course, mentioned that Common Core is not just a list that we can check off, and I've heard this view before. A new thought came to mind as I listened. Perhaps Common Core presents more of a stance. By that I mean that as one reads, the standards represent a stance, an evaluative one, more in the vein of Rosenblatt's efferent stance that a reader should take when reading, listening, viewing. That is a great point, Christina. You may recall back to read 514, looking at Louise Rosenblatt's, theories of your approach to reading. You're either taking an aesthetic approach where you're reading for enjoyment, or you're taking an efferent stance where you're really reading to gain meaning. And that is a huge shift with the Common Core. We aren't just reading for pleasure and enjoyment to, enjoy the imagery and make text to self connections. No, we're taking that efferent stance and we're really looking critically at word choice, at craft structure, all of those things. So that is accurate in that it is a new approach to text we're taking with the Common Core. There's also a difference in the type of text that we're looking at, as Vince mentions. He realizes that the new standards place more emphasis on the reading of informational texts, right? He didn't realize how much, but that by senior year, 70% of the text should be informational, and it's not just 70% in their literature class, but 70% across the whole school day should be informational. And then Vince goes on to say we don't want to degrade or ignore literary texts though, because those are important to be able to understand and comprehend too. So great point, Vince. Yes, the type of text we're looking at has more of an emphasis on informational text, but we still need to teach and instruct, and especially those, as you mentioned, high school teachers who do have a mastery of teaching literature in inspirational ways. We don't want to negate that practice either. So what else is driving the Common Core? Elvira points out that a third thing that caught her attention is one of the guiding principles of the Common Core is really that college and career readiness. And yeah, that is, really where the Common Core came from, in the knowledge that our students are not prepared for the level of rigor at college and even in careers. So in her opinion, um, being college and career ready requires habit formation. You can't just do it in 1 year. And habits take a long time to form, which a lot of you brought up the time element. What's the rush here with Common Core? Why are we, making this marked switch so quickly? We're not really preparing them yet to take such an assessment, and you're completely right. But the premise behind the switch to Common Core has a lot to do with college and career readiness, which is why we're using more informational text. We're having them take more of an analytical approach to the text, that efferent stance from Rosenblatt as well. All right, more on the standards. As you probably noticed, there are some mixed perceptions out there. Some of us have a bad taste in our mouth. Some of us are very positive about the Common Core standards. Jennifer Denzel in our class is one of them. She says, I have been to several Common Core workshops through my district and feel like I have a handle on the new standards. I've actually been teaching based on them this year and I'm loving it. We used to spend 1 week on a piece of text and now we commonly spend 2 or 3. The students are thinking deeper about what they read and they are learning more content through the process. It has been a blast. So this could be someone you may want to reach out to for some examples of what Common Core instruction looks like in the classroom, because it seems that Jennifer has been very successful and is also already seeing the benefits of this deep look at texts and doing closer reads of them. Kim says, I was also amazed at how many times that the lead researchers from DIVLS were mentioned in the old framework. So many ties, she says. Quick aside, I love the new way fluency is being defined in Common Core. Hide the timers in the back of the closets. Instead, we are reading grade level text with purpose and understanding. We're reading grade level text orally with accuracy, appropriate rate, and expression on successive readings. So it's not just the cold read, but we're also rereading and we're encouraging students to reread, and you're no longer penalized for being a thoughtful reader. So there are definite some positive emotions out there on the standards. But what about the test? And if you haven't read the picture book, Testing Miss Malarkey, I always read it prior to testing season because it's just a very clever, insightful look in children's book form of how we prepare students for the test. There's definitely an illustration of the art teacher teaching them how to fill in bubbles darkly and completely. So yeah, testing Miss Malarkey, they mentioned the test a lot in parentheses. So some concerns. Is there any way we can get access to a sample test so I can see for myself what's to come? Yeah, in part 2, I show you where to find that on smarterbalance.org or parkonline.org. Keep in mind that there are 2 components to the Smarter Balanced assessment. First, you have the computer adaptive test, right? That's happening online. You can take a pilot test for that and kind of see what that looks like. But then second, we have these performance tasks, which hopefully help you see the connection between reading, writing, listening, speaking, vocabulary discussion, all of these pieces, and really gets at a balanced literacy approach. In the performance tasks, they happen over a course of many days. Students are first absorbing information from a reading, they're discussing, they're collaborating, and then they're doing a writing piece. So it's more of a holistic approach that gets at the synchrony of literacy development as well. So it's not just the computer-based assessment, and actually the computer-based assessment can actually be done paper and pencil. So you don't need to get laptops and new technology if you don't have that. And then there's the performance task piece. So there are 2 pieces to the assessment. Make sure you know that. Will these new standards force teachers to teach to the test, or will it round out our student population by strengthening critical thinking skills? Great question, which largely depends on your environment you're in, right? If it is a high stakes assessment, which often leads to a lot of stress, and teachers and schools finding creative ways to do exactly that, right? To teach to the test. What I loved from the Fisher and Frey article was their focus on having a school come up with a goal based on pedagogy, not a goal based on test performance. So something to think about as you're working on school improvement teams. What are our goals? Are they actually based on pedagogy and improving the quality of reading, or are they based on a test? Because if your goals are based on a test, then it's highly likely that you will be teaching to that test. Other concerns. My question is, with the new assessment, are we evaluating learning or the student's ability or inability to use technology? My concern is about fairness and equity in all classrooms and access to technology to succeed. So I know Valerie is actually helping her district, but she's working with some private Catholic schools, but she's helping them evaluate their assessment practices right now. So she's been thinking a lot about things like construct validity. Is the assessment measuring what it is intended to measure? Or as a byproduct, is there consequential validity that we are actually measuring a student's ability to use technology? Something to think about. Stephanie adds on, my third graders took the pilot for the math last year. It was tough for them, especially using all the tools they don't normally use, like graphing on the computer, clicking and dragging. We are continually told to take the practice test with students, which of course we'll do, but how can a practice test make up for the fact that we have no way of ever using those testing tools during normal instruction? Great point. So there is a lot of things to manipulate with the technology on the assessment. Taking practice tests will help, but why are we taking these practice tests? Are they actually informing instruction, or are they just teaching to the test? Don't we have budget problems already? How are we going to afford to properly train faculty and purchase necessary materials and supplementary materials as well as technology? So there are some funding concerns out there, which is definitely very valid. You can do a paper pencil format of the test, so it doesn't have to be done electronically. However, the benefit of doing it electronically is it is computer adaptive, which will help students not to get frustrated by being exposed to questions that are too difficult. So good news, the test can still be given paper pencil for those without laptops or who have a network or internet connection not able to support all of this. Oh, the test. Kathy says, I am very interested in seeing how the whole state testing scenario plays out. Me too, Kathy. I think this could easily be a disaster for the first few years. Yes, I think it probably will. At a staff meeting a few months ago, we took a practice online smarter balance test, which I recommend everyone do. Some of the questions were very challenging, with the inference questions being the hardest. I took the third grade level test and it was challenging. Yeah, it was very challenging. I took that as well, and it required a lot of stamina. I kind of went ADD on question number 3 or 4, and I can't imagine being 8 and taking this. I think this will present quite a problem for the first few years or so, and imagine test scores will go down, creating a problem for districts and schools. Yeah, there's definitely going to be a sort of baseline data collection, which is going to be happening next year, and a lot of norming and adjusting based off that data, because the assessment is completely different than ever been used before. Completely different paradigm, so lots of fun that we'll be going through. All right, accommodations for the test. Erin, I also question why there isn't a separate assessment for kids who have IEPs and need accommodations. How are students going to perform next year taking smarter balanced assessments for the first time? So Kim, who is our special education resource specialist guru, says, as for IEPs, all students, except for about 1% severely handicapped, will take the test, but many accommodations can be used, even text readers. But as they take the test is also designed to their level so that students are meaningfully participated and not getting frustrated out, which is very important. So yes, there are definitely many accommodations that can be made for students with IEPs. However, you want to make sure that that is in their IEP, when you're setting their goals and modifications, accommodations, that they do have, state testing accommodations. And if so, then you are definitely able and required by law to provide them those accommodations. And then also with the test being computer adaptive, it won't be frustrating for them. I had quite a challenge giving a third grade student earlier in the school year our state test. He definitely ran from the room several times, and I don't blame him because he was highly frustrated by the third grade, level state test, and we couldn't give him a different test because it was his first time taking the test. And that's kind of a funny thing that um, they have to perform poorly enough the first time they take the state test in order to get a modified state test. So let's really frustrate them before we can give them what they need. So yes, here's a resource of special ed accommodation. So Smarter Balanced on their website actually has a pretty comprehensive document explaining all of the different accommodations that can be used for underrepresented students. So if you have questions about that, please check that out. All right, shifting a little bit to talk about the results. Great questions from Elvira. What will the data look like? I also see an increase in the use of formative assessments in the classroom in order to revisit the alignment of classroom instruction with the Common Core. She goes on to say that we may need to get out our textbooks, right, from any data courses we took, and in order to really understand the types of data we're going to be presented with. Administrators, coaches, and specialists are going to have to step in and provide guidelines as to what is the data that they are looking for and how to get. So not only do we have a lot of questions about what the assessment will look like, but what is the data that's going to come from this assessment? When and how will it be delivered to teachers? How are we supposed to examine it? Good stuff like that. In past we've just been given a score that said below basic, basic, etc., but that doesn't really give you any information to inform instruction. So maybe with it being computer adaptive, we could actually see their performance on specific questions linked to specific standards, which would really help us as a school to plan goals and initiatives about strengths and needs for our school. All right, adjustments based on results. Erin, I thought it was interesting how the reading mentioned that as the states administer their assessments each year, the results will be looked at and the standards can be changed based on these results. So she has a lot of great questions as far as what is the evidence going to be? Is it solely based on the new Smarter Balance state testing, or is actual feedback from teachers and college professors going to be provided to make some of these decisions? So Erin, great questions. I don't have the answer for you because I think this is largely going to be determined when we find ourselves in this position next spring, when we actually have this data and we know what we're talking about. All right, many challenges. Thank you, Stephanie, for highlighting a few. Older grade students are really going to struggle, yeah, because this is a completely different way than they've been receiving instruction in the past, and somehow we're going to have to make up what they missed over the next few years. She's also concerned about the misuse of funds geared towards the implementation of Common Core. Yeah, pretty much every curriculum developer right now is pushing some curriculum or tool that is aligned to Common Core, but given that it's still so new, I don't know that enough time has elapsed for these developers to completely align something to Common Core and to field test it and to have the research to support that it is a successful tool for teaching the Common Core. So I could see how schools would find these different programs very alluring, be tempted to spend hundreds and thousands and trillions of dollars on them, squillions, and eventually find out that, oh, maybe this wasn't the best tool for us. I still think we will teach to a test. Yep, that probably will happen a little bit. As an example of her district spending a lot of money to provide students with the opportunity to learn to type so that they can type in the Smarter Balance test. And this goes back to construct validity. Is this test measuring typing, or is it actually measuring the skills we need? Lack of funds to supply teachers with complex text and nonfiction text. Yeah, we're going to need those resources to get the materials. There is still nothing that addresses the issues children face when outside of our classrooms. and the role that these issues play inside the classroom. That is correct. Lots of challenges. Let's talk about challenges pertaining to curriculum and teaching materials. So the biggest thing I heard you say was that the standards don't give us very many suggestions for implementation, and that's where the draft document is going to come in, but it's still a work in progress. So as Kathy points out, she feels challenged by the math standards and is challenged by the fact that her current curriculum, probably a scripted program, is not aligned. They've been told to supplement, but since they're supplementing all over the place, is that really providing cohesive instruction? Probably not. Her priority has been language arts, reading and writing, but over the next few years, she'll need to adjust math too. It would be amazing to have a curriculum that encourages deeper thinking, reasoning. Yeah. So this is a challenge where we're all at. Everyone needs to change reading language arts instruction as well as math instruction, how to prioritize which one first. It's really difficult to do them both masterfully at the same time. There also are supposedly all of these great scripted programs out there that are going to help you teach the Common Core, but I'm not convinced that there is enough research behind them that supports that they've been highly effective. I know my school is now switching to Reading Street for reading, and then next year we'll be switching our math curriculum, and I'm not sure which one that our curriculum department has selected, but hopefully they will be doing a better job than our current programs we're using now. Christina, what will the materials look like? I have not seen examples of the programs. Are there whole new ELA and math programs being used at schools, or is it just the way the work is presented by the teacher and the teachers have to be extra crafty? So I think it's a little bit of both. I know right now my teachers are using the Imagine It curriculum and being really crafty. They're still using the stories, but they're taking a different approach to the stories to really emphasize the Common Core standards. Whereas next year they're going to have different materials that they're going to need to learn and be trained on in order to implement. So I think you can do both. I know a lot of districts and schools don't have the funding right now to completely switch all of their materials, especially if they just bought, something else a few years back. So it's probably going to be a lot of both. What do I use? Susan, it was also noted that teachers are therefore free to provide students with whatever tools and knowledge that their professional judgment and experience deem necessary. And so we have a lot of discretion left to the teacher. But at the same time, the state is asking teachers to make sure their students meet these standards, but really aren't giving them the tools to do so. Not to mention, there's no release of information on the test. There is some on those websites, so definitely check that out. So, how do teachers know what to expect? Right. I mean, basically, bottom line, there's much uncertainty right now, and that's expected, and there isn't much you can do. But over the next few years, it should be a little more clear as we start to take the assessments and as developers and research have more information. Jen, in response to Susan, I think your concerns are valid. Clearly, educators need the tools necessary to teach these standards, and we also need to be able to preview the test to be sure that we're preparing them. It has been my experience that both of these supports are in the works. Personally, I love that the standards don't prescribe specific teaching methodologies. They allow teachers to make informed instructional decisions, which is how it should be. As for the specific tools, these are being slowly rolled out by textbook companies. Look before you buy. There are a lot of poor attempts out there. So great points. Because they don't specify the methodology, you do have more autonomy as a teacher, but that can also be really overwhelming when you have no idea of what it should look like. So much to think about. Kim points out that Common Core is not intended to define all or can or should be taught. Teachers are used to having a curriculum, and the fact that it doesn't spell everything out will allow teachers to be more innovative, but could also lead to substantial gaps in learning, right? When teachers are not prepared to operate in this way, that could lead to significant gaps. So previous standards definitely controlled more for teacher variability. Good point there, Kim. So there definitely needs to be some substantial assistance to help teachers in this switch. So Sounds like we need some reading specialists out there to prepare teachers to be ready to meet the challenges of Common Core implementation and to provide coaching and modeling. Jess says, I anticipate the transitional time to be challenging and stressful. It is unsettling not to have a full grasp of what you will be teaching. So it's basically going to be taking a lot of time as well. Teachers don't often have this time. I know they're trying to provide a lot of time right now for professional development and things to help you in this adjustment. But yeah, there is a lot of uncertainty. It is going to be a challenge. But the nice thing is that most states, not all, but most states are in this together. And I think that we are headed in a more positive direction as far as really developing deep thinking in reading and math instruction. So I think this is a step in the right direction, but it's a difficult one to stomach, especially if you're someone who likes predictability and wants to know what is in your future. This might be very difficult. All right, the transition. Great question from Susan. Why the rush? And it's interesting when you think about the fact that we adopted the Common Core as a state of the state of California in 2010, but it doesn't seem like until this year, 2013-14, is there really been a push for Common Core? And I'm wondering why that is. Is it because we're still taking the original state test developed from No Child Left Behind? And now that that test is going away, all of a sudden it's a rush to get students prepared for Smarter Balanced, and it kind of seems like that is the case here. Why hasn't it been more of a gradual rollout since 2010? I remember 2010. I didn't hear a whole lot about the Common Core state standards, but now it is a very stressful, environment where it's being crammed in our heads, as Jen pointed out earlier. And then Susan asked some questions about the teachers in the group. How are you incorporating these standards into day-to-day teaching kinds of things? Now. So, Bettina, another problem I foresee is that our students are not ready to perform under Common Core. Many have not ever had to think critically, cite evidence. Instead, they just bubbled in answers. There's going to be a steep learning curve. You are exactly right. This is a big challenge to teachers now, is to prepare them for this huge paradigm shift in the instruction and assessment world. What will happen to the students that grew up under California content standards and now have to graduate with Common Core? Well, we're going to hopefully catch them up as best as we can, and they should be pretty good, decent readers, but not very good deep readers, so that's where we will need to focus. How is the Smarter Balance testing behind the Common Core going to let teachers have time to apply the guiding principle of clear focus when it's going to take a lot of prerequisite skills? Right, great question. Yeah, we definitely need some time to apply, but we don't have that because Smarter Balanced is coming next year. Christina Vicente, my questions are, how do we manage this transition time, knowing that challenge is a difficult thing? How do you manage people as they go through this change? And you need to be supportive, you need to be empathetic, you need to help them think more big picture. Ultimately we are headed in the right direction, but right now there is a lot of uncertainty. There's not a whole lot we can do about that. So we're going to try our best to take these standards, to break them apart, to better understand what they mean, and to find best practices, use our formative assessment process to support that what we are doing in the classroom is effective and effectively teaching the Common Core, and that's what we're going to do right now. All right, training and teacher development. We obviously need a lot of that. What kinds of supports are administrators prepared to give? Yeah, it is important for teachers to know that administrators are ready to meet the demands of professional development. Again, this depends a lot on the context you are in, what resources your school or district has to provide professional development, but we are going to need a lot of teacher training. As Vince point out, will enough staff development be provided for on-the-ground classroom teachers for the Common Core state standards? Hopefully so. I know schools feel the pressure to perform well on these tests, so I imagine that they're going to do as much as they can. Will the full complexity of the Common Core be realized, or will they be poorly and superficially implemented? Because of the fact that it is a rush to get them instated, it does make me nervous that we are going to do a superficial job. Um, Hopefully that is not the case because that's not the intent behind them. Do you think the implementation of Common Core will open up new job opportunities for literacy or reading specialists? I would hope so because I think more now than ever, we really need highly trained and skilled reading professionals who can help teachers dissect these standards and know because they don't tell you a lot of the how and the what and bring those best practices to the forefront of teachers' minds and coach teachers in that. So hopefully it does. But Tina, how are we going to ensure that all teachers are becoming teachers of reading? Will there be a required reading certificate added to all teacher credentials, or will districts hire more literacy coaches? Hopefully so. I know there's been a lot of criticism about teacher development programs lately, not having enough instruction of how to be a teacher of reading. So hopefully that will help programs to shift and provide more training for teachers in that area. All right, English learners and special education, there's a lot, that's left unclear about these two groups. Teachers will definitely need to be more knowledgeable of the ELD standards, and it is really nice that California in their framework that's in draft form is merging ELA and ELD standards to help us have a better understanding. So would future teaching credentials include a higher proficiency level when dealing with ELDs? Hopefully so, although California is one of the only states that requires the CLAD or the language acquisition certification. So I think that California is ahead of other states in that because of the population that they serve, but hopefully they will continue to require teachers to gain the knowledge and skills they need to effectively teach students with different language needs. How are policymakers going to be realistic about their assumptions regarding ELLs and students with disabilities? So yeah, that's a great point, and we won't really know until we're at that point, but there are accommodations for those special education students. Parent education, great question from Kayla. There is going to be many questions that parents are going to have as well. They are the, child's first teacher, and we are going to need to equip them to know what these Common Core state standards are. We've had a few parent nights at my school to teach them about it. We have a Common Core spotlight in our weekly parent newsletter from the principal, but how much are they really reading and absorbing? How much do they really understand? So, parents are very much an untapped resource sometimes, and it really is our job to partnership with them and to teach them more about the Common Core. So great question here. How can schools effectively communicate the new expectations to parents and community members? If anyone has a great idea for that, please let us know because I know we're kind of struggling through that as well. What impact will the Common Core have on schools and communities that are socioeconomically challenged? How can text complexity be achieved for students who struggle with reading? So lots of training for parents and staff will need to come from all of this. All right, this has been a lot of information. You guys have had a lot of great questions. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to answer all of them, but if you are able to find out some new information for us on some of the big questions, that would be very helpful to send my way. You're always free to do some outside research. I will empower you to use that agency, right, to figure it out. And I just wanted to close this part of the lecture with a plea from Jessica, who is our teacher abroad right now, kind of an outsider perspective looking in, which is an interesting perspective to see. She says the last thing communities need is more stress. Tension has been a problem throughout the country for a while, and it is conveyed all over the news with the terrible decisions people make and how they are affecting American culture as a whole. I wish there was a way to add the teaching of positive character traits, living a healthy life both physically and mentally, and living together in harmony. Maybe with a more intelligent and skillful youth will also come a safer and more stable nation. hopefully the Common Core is contributing to that too. So great perspective, great broad perspective there. Common Core is just one piece of the puzzle, but how are we preparing them for life and to be a good decision maker, to be judicious, and to be a good person? Great, great thought there. All right, on that note, I'm going to wrap this up, and you can join me for the next screencast, which goes over upcoming assignments.